Yeah, okay. So the title of this video is going to be Everything is Philosophy, and in brackets I'm going to say not in a pretentious way or in a non-pretentious way or something, like whatever sounds better in English. I find that we're constantly practicing philosophy in everything that we're doing, and this is more kind of an idea that you might get already from people like, I don't know. I mean, Heidegger is a little canceled depending on who you're talking in the philosophical spectrum. I guess with the continental people, he's not. But basically, this guy was a Nazi. He just really talked about being. That was kind of his main thing, what it means to be, because that seems to be the underlining thing of all things in the universe, that they are kind of there and that they exist. I mean, his whole like life practice is very philosophical, but it's also very much about being in the world, which is his thing, right? Like being in the world, that sign, being there. That's like the German word for being. So it's a very active take on philosophy, I guess. And then I think of Aristotle as well, because he had this idea of phronesis. Phronesis is practical wisdom. Aristotle is more on the side of you just have to live life, you just have to see around you kind of what are the social norms and what's happening, and what the people like and dislike, and then you can know what's kind of good, what's bad, because there's obvious things that we reject in society and there's obvious things that we accept. How do you know that? By kind of being in the world, by talking to your neighbors and seeing that people don't litter, and then you choose not to litter because it seems to be a good quality, and eventually it's a good quality because then there's no plastic everywhere and trees are growing happy and like there's no fires, and you come into the world, you see how shit works, then you do shit, you know so that is a very active take on life. And I feel like there is this idea that philosophy is a very detached practice, very detached from life, which I agree it can get to that. And very often, like you meet in the philosophical circles, you meet so many people who are super antisocial, who don't really know how to talk to other people, who are very shy. But I think philosophy then becomes a very safe space to shelter yourself in your thoughts and in the thoughts of others through writing and books. So you don't actually have to interact with the world because somebody will tell you what they think about it. The way someone writes and the way they speak, they're completely different in many cases. Going back to Heidegger, like this is one person that writes very complex German versus how they say he was in real life. They say he was super, just chill and had a very informal way of speaking and very colloquial. So if you're reading these books, it's not telling you a lot. It just tells you what the person is thinking about. But you also need to observe how they interact when they're not alone, how they interact in social settings, how people change from social settings to private settings. I mean, I feel like I'm constantly practicing philosophy more than studying it academically. Like I am just very aware of social dynamics and I'm trying to follow what's going on. And I talk a lot of philosophy. I don't like name dropping all the time or saying like, oh, you think like an existentialist, or wow, that's a very ontological statement, or wow, you're thinking about knowledge this way. But like that's annoying and it gets old, and especially when you're using all these big words with people who don't know what they are, eventually it gets annoying. Sometimes you just want to be in a conversation where you're not expected to intake something actively all the time, even though you're constantly intaking. When it becomes a conscious activity, it's very energy consuming, like the way that going to class just makes you hungry even though you're just sitting there. And I think the same thing happens in a conversation that is very theory heavy. I think they are qualifying the conversation in their mind as like, okay, this is philosophy, and then eventually they want to go into something else. Whereas when you simply start asking a person their thoughts on life and their thoughts on what a good life is, and people are more open to talking freely. Politics talk is super philosophical because at the underlying the baseline of politics is just the idea on how we should live life. What's a correct way of living life ethically, whatever, how a society should function. People have a lot of opinions on politics, and I think these are very philosophical opinions. And they all boil down to the way that they think life is supposed to be lived. I think I'm just talking about this because one, I think that just the realm of philosophy is very open for pretentiousness and saying like, oh yeah, we're kind of here, we're doing something different. Or people in philosophy will always refer to non people who are not in philosophy actively or in academic philosophy as like the others, or like, the common people or normal people, or they'll use a lot of this terminology will come up. And I think it's frustrating because they're just closing out an entire realm of like philosophers, let's say. And it's not that they have to be philosophers in order to come in. It's just like there's not the thing that differentiates philosophy students from people who don't like actively study philosophy is the academic aspect. You're doing the extra work to get the terminology correct, and you're looking more at language, and you're writing, and so it's very specifically a linguistic academic realm where these people are not coming in. So I would be more comfortable if the statements were more based on the academic side of philosophy, like, oh well, these people, the others who don't do academy, the others outside of the academy, or the people who don't write papers or things like that. But otherwise, like, if we're talking just purely about philosophy, everybody is constantly practicing philosophy. It is simply a thing that comes by virtue of being in the world. You will, like, ethics are ingrained in us, knowledge and the way that we learn things, and this like quick decisions that you're making without communicating, like when you're explaining something to someone in the workplace, and then you're like, okay, that this person works better with this, and this person works better sitting down, and this person works better with numbers, and then you just are making these decisions actively on like who gets to do what based on what they do best, because at the end of it all, you want things to be done faster, or you want a more efficient system, or you want something to be done with better quality. And this is because you believe that people deserve, in the case of the farm, it's like we want to give people the best quality produce, so I'm gonna do this in the best order, so that like my vegetables will be crisp and fresh by the time they get to market, because I believe people deserve good food, because they're paying for it, because so it all boils down to like, if you bring it back and back and back, like if you think why you support the ideas that you do, you will find your underlining philosophies for everything, because you believe people deserve a good quality food, because they deserve a good health, or because people are paying, and there's value in money, so then that's where your value system is at, because whatever you come into these questions, because that is the way that life is being lived. And I say this because I've talked philosophically with many people from all walks of life throughout my young life. I've had the pleasure of meeting people from all age groups, from all jobs, non-jobs, activities, and with all of them I've been able to get really interesting takes on what they think about different things of life. And to me, they've all been philosophical conversations. And I also remember, like, I heard this from a guy who studies philosophy. He's like in grad school, and he was talking about his wife, and just randomly made the comment like, oh, unfortunately she's just not philosophically oriented like that, she just doesn't get it, or something like that. And I was like, what? So she has no like sense of ethics, or no sense of good and evil? Like, my response to that would be, maybe she's not good at academic philosophy because she just is not good at writing papers, or she just doesn't know how to kind of do these arguments. But obviously, I guess if you come home, like, you're like, hi honey, what's for dinner? By the way, have you thought about the telos of being, or have you thought about like the natural implications of that sign in the ethical conscience, or so, eh, or some bullshit like that, with a bunch of random words that make no sense, and that only makes sense to you because you read like three very specific books, and you took that one class like 3 years ago with this one retired professor. Sure, you have another language that you use to communicate your endeavors, but if you just cannot talk about it in plain English, like, then what do you know? I mean, his wife is for sure philosophically oriented. If she wasn't, then I would be concerned about the person that he married, because it's like, okay, so she probably, what you if I take his statement to be like true, like to be fully literal, like, okay, she's not good for philosophy, then she does not have a sense of good or of evil, and then she probably does not have a sense of like how she learns things, and what if they have a kid, then like she has no sense of how to teach, and this, that's disconcerting, and it doesn't sound like the kind of person that he would marry, being a philosophy student, right? Like, these questions must be important to him, so he must be with someone that cares about them, and she must not have a sense of beauty as well, or or aesthetic sensibilities, or art appreciation or taste. Completely ridiculous. I don't know this woman, but I bet she has all of these things and more. I bet she has very hot takes on what it is like to be alive and what it is like to be a woman, and so on and so forth. So she is obviously inclined to philosophy. She just doesn't have a very pretentious way of going about it. So that's what makes it not valid enough for this guy, which is sad. Um, and it's mostly the case, unfortunately, at least in many circles of philosophy. And the thing is that it is dominated by white men, obviously, because it is a, academia is it's a very European thing. So it makes sense that these are the demographics, and that the demographics that are more welcome and that feel most comfortable in these spaces. Because being neither of these, I find myself being the odd one out in many cases. I find myself just being less heard or less seen, and I'm like, okay, this will happen, but at least I know that I try to be in circles that feel kinder, and they're usually not very white and not very and heteronormative, I guess. And they feel better. They're nice, and people are very concerned with making academic philosophy accessible. And the talks are usually draw examples from real life, because why would you go into hypotheticals and when you have non-ideal realities occurring all around you all the time that you can very well analyze and that people would follow because they are contemporary as well. So it's like, oh well, I saw this in the news, so I definitely have opinions about it. Whereas, making a completely ideal case scenario about some fucking veil and some fucking idea society, and just like these delusions about something that is not really going to happen. Instead of just sitting down with the society that you have and saying it's fucked up, okay, what does that mean? Why is it fucked up? Because I can assure you people have thoughts about that too. And at the same time, I do see, like, I'm reading Animal Farm because I'm in a farm. So, and I had never read that book before, so it just makes sense. It's like a little novel before bed, and it just sounds very Marxist, or at least like the communist revolution that Marx is kind of describing. Like, then I think, okay, I see this kind of works, and I can see how this influenced an entire generation to be very well versed in Marxism, even if they've never read Marx. Some of the ideas that are presented in it about, the the people, the humans being the ones who profit from all the labor of the animals and the ones who control all the conditions, and like why that is bad, and why their spoils make them be the way they are, and why the animals just have to work really hard for the community to build something that is theirs for their freedom, blah blah blah, the freedom from this, you know system of exploitation and whatever. That, at least to me, it sounds like a very Marxist language. And so even in that case, you can see how a whole generation who read this book knows about Marxism without having read Marx. And this is the case with just so many other things, like so many novels, so many books, so many movies that are inspired in whatever philosophy person was famous at the time. And then it passes down an entire generation. It's not about knowing the difference between, being in the world, and being with a small b and being with a capital B. It's about understanding what it is like to exist and what that feels like, and how, like, existence is just kind of like this collective thing that is going on, rather than, oh, something that happens in my brain and then everything else is, I could doubt it. And oh my god, like the freaking Aristophanes speech of the symposium, where people are like, oh yeah, we used to be this ball with four legs and four arms and two heads, until the gods, like, they got mad at us because, they try to climb the heavens, so they cut them in half, so now we're all looking for our other half. Do you know how many times I heard this, as a kid, or read it on Facebook? And then I read the symposium in college, and I'm like, oh my god, this is where it comes from. What? So I knew Platonic theory all along. It's just that eventually in my life, when I was in my 20s, I gave it a name. That's it. Now I know that it's Plato's. Does it make a difference? Not really. I mean, it does add a lot of context to it, because I'm like, okay, now I've read the book and I understand kind of where it falls into place and all that. But the myth I already knew. The myth, so many of my friends know already. So my friends know about Plato. I just need to tell them. We just need to tell them that they know about Plato, but they do. So for those purposes, they might as well be academic philosophers too. Well, I guess, like, when I'm in academic philosophy circles, that's what's expected of you, and that's what really gets you respect as well, which is where I think it gets confounded when you leave those circles and you're out in other non academic philosophy circles, and then you feel the need to drop these names and just boast about that knowledge that they've earned, because that's how they know to show what they know, and that's how they know to show, to earn respect and to prove that they're doing something with their degree or their career. It's like, okay, I have to be this kind of person, I have to appear smart so people know that I'm doing something. Because there's also a lot of memes around people who study philosophy, and I get it, it just sounds like we think about life and we sit down and read books all day, but actually we also go to conferences. But I think that's the whole meme comes from that fact that it does feel like a waste of time to only do philosophy and stick to philosophy only, and not ever leave that circle and apply it into life and practice philosophy. And I think if we could just break down those walls, those divisions in our minds that keep us, us versus them, or I have this knowledge that people in the room don't know about, like that's just such an isolating position that whether it is true or not, it's just not helpful. So we should just drop it. It doesn't always have to be name dropping and trying to teach and being like, well, I know this and you don't, so I'm just not going to waste my time having this conversation with you. Because then that's really where the practicality of philosophy comes into place, especially when you discuss it with people who just like don't do academia all day, because they are in other parts of life that are important to know about and important to get their perspective. And it's cool, it's just cool, it's cool to talk philosophy with family, it's cool to talk philosophy with friends, because then they actually kind of bring you down and ground you into the world where this philosophy should be applied. And then you can see as someone, I mean, because if you're studying philosophy, I assume you're very floaty and you're very like kind of out of it, like I am most of the time, which is not good. So this video is in great part a critique to myself. But I mean, it's good to just kind of have these arguments with people who are more, realistic and pragmatic about things, and see, well, would this work? Would this not work? Does it make sense? Is it stupid? Why? And then you learn, and then you continue growing. You apply it into life. You hopefully try to do something for the world, and then you die, and that's it. It's all fucking pleasure principle. We're all death driven. That's it.